Have you ever had that feeling, that, subtle sense that you're kind of trapped by your family dynamics, those really intricate, often frustrating relationships you can't just, well, walk away from? It's a feeling I think a lot of us know, that sense that no matter what you do, you're sort of stuck in these old patterns.
Oh, absolutely. It really is almost universal, isn't it? Family life, I mean, it's so intimate, so interconnected. It makes it incredibly tough to avoid, all the different personalities, the agendas, even those patterns passed down through generations. And yeah, while some families really thrive, many others are just, well, they're navigating some pretty complex struggles.
Definitely. And here's a thought. What if the distress, you feel that anxiety, maybe even despair or certain physical things, what if it wasn't a personal feeling? What if it was actually a kind of hidden message from your family environment itself? That's really the provocative question at the heart of our deep dive today. We're digging into a powerful, really practical toolkit from Eric Maisel's book, Overcoming Your Difficult Family: 8 Skills for Thriving in Any Family Situation. Our mission here is to pull out strategies that can genuinely transform your personal experience within these, tricky dynamics. We're drawing right from Maisel's work, his examples, his advice. As Dr. Lee Jampolsky said about it, this book will set you free.
Yeah, and what's really striking about Maisel's approach right from the get-go is how bold it is, how unique. He basically challenges the standard way of thinking, the common practice of labeling feelings or behaviors we don't like, sadness, anxiety, even a kid being restless as some kind of mental disorder.
So he's kind of flipping the script on diagnosis then. Instead of jumping to a label, he explores this, well, pretty radical idea that maybe these feelings, these symptoms, they might just be natural consequences.
Yeah.
Natural consequences of life, especially, growing up in or still living in a difficult family. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If your so-called personal problems are actually family
Yeah.
problems wearing a disguise, what does that mean for how you tackle them?
It's a huge shift in perspective. I mean, if your anxiety isn't just about brain chemistry, but maybe it's a natural response to, say, a really chaotic home or constant criticism, well, then the power to change shifts, doesn't it? It moves squarely into your hands. This non-medical viewpoint is incredibly empowering because it moves the focus away from waiting for other people to change or waiting for some diagnosis and puts it onto what you can control
Yeah.
yourself right now.
Right, you can act immediately.
Exactly. You're not paralyzed by things outside of you.
That's a really critical difference. So, okay, if these inner struggles are caused, or at least partly caused, by these difficult family environments, then Maisel's toolkit isn't just self-help anymore. It's like a direct path to actually reducing that emotional pain.
Precisely. And he lays out these 8 core skills. But they're not just abstract ideas you hope for. No, they're an actual actionable skill set you can use. He calls them SMARTs: strength, calmness, clarity, awareness, courage, presence, and resilience.
And the great thing is, these aren't only for family stuff, right? These are tools you can deploy anywhere in your life to feel less stressed, feel more empowered, and really live the life you actually want. It's almost like a universal operating system for just feeling better.
Okay, let's dive into some of these key skills then. Let's make them real with examples from the book. First one, SMARTs. Sounds simple, but what does being smart actually mean when you're trying to navigate a difficult family? Well, being smart here is all about making intelligent, sort of strategic choices for yourself. It means, knowing when it's smarter to just avoid a situation that drains you, or when to speak up, but directly, how to adjust your own attitude sometimes to protect your own peace, or even getting clear on what your life's really about, separating yourself from all the family drama. It's like being strategically self-aware.
The example of Maureen in the book really brings this home. She knew, like deep down, the smart move was to carve out space for her writing by going to a cafe sometimes. Even though it felt, as Maisel puts it, dangerous because her husband was tummy invalid and needed care, she felt so much guilt.
Oh, absolutely. Huge guilt and dread. She definitely needed courage as well as smarts for that one. But the interesting thing was, when she finally did it, when she managed to leave the house to write, her situation actually got better. Turns out her husband, who she'd been hovering over constantly, maybe he needed a little space too? And one day, she comes home and he'd done the laundry. It was small, sure, but significant. It just shows how one smart action, backed by courage, can shift a dynamic you thought was completely fixed.
That story really sticks with you. It makes you think about a specific family issue you might be facing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's about money or someone's needs or trust issues. And then you genuinely ask yourself, okay, is there something smart I haven't tried yet? Something strategic?
Yeah. Okay, so shifting from smart choices, let's talk about strength. And this isn't about hitting the gym, though. That can help too, I suppose. This is about inner fortitude, that, deep inner grit.
Right, that resilience you need to, say, withstand constant criticism, or deal with relatives being envious, or navigate those really demanding family members who try to run your life. It's
Mhm.
about shutting down that little voice that says, I can't do that, and replacing it with a firm, yes, I can.
Maisel gives some really powerful anecdotes here. They really hit home. There was this one client, she had an old toilet just sitting in her living room for months because her husband wouldn't finish a bathroom renovation. And it wasn't just a toilet, right? It symbolized everything wrong in the marriage, screaming at her, "You are so weak." It took enormous inner strength for her to finally give an ultimatum, but eventually the toilet was gone.
Wow. And wasn't there another client who found the strength to buy a plane ticket
Uh,
to her dream place,
mm.
finally breaking free from her mother's emotional hold, that will that had basically held her hostage for decades? Or the writer client who had to find the strength to live with a passive-aggressive partner just so she could keep doing her successful work, learning to tune him out, call him out when needed.
Yes, exactly. And then there's that really intense story of the mother. She had to find this profound strength, just immense strength, to send her son, who was dealing drugs, to a therapeutic wilderness camp, even though he was protesting violently, threatening her. It was her last resort. And ultimately, it turned his life around. These are acts of deep, deep internal strength, not just physical power.
That idea of wearing armor seems so helpful for building this strength, developing that thicker skin, rejecting the idea that others have a right to criticize you, accepting opinions are just opinions, consciously deciding not to get defensive. Maisel says families are often full of these carelessly thrown arrows, right? So your new, thicker skin is like your first defense. What else does he suggest? To
Yeah.
really build up that inner fortitude.
Well, he goes a step further with something he calls a personal strength ceremony. Now, this isn't about superstition or anything like that. It's about creating a real, tangible anchor for an internal shift. So you choose a symbol, maybe it's a strong oak tree or a fierce tiger, whatever means strength to you. And then by connecting with it physically each day, maybe you wear a charm or touch a picture and you affirm, "I am strong." You're actively engaging your subconscious. You're kind of priming your mind to actually embody that strength. It's a deliberate practice to rewrite that inner story.
That's a really interesting way to make something abstract like strength feel very concrete. Okay, let's shift focus again. Let's talk about a skill that ties into taking control through how we communicate. Clarity. Why is being direct so vital in family dynamics, particularly when things are tough?
It's crucial because, speaking indirectly or going on and on, that often comes from ambivalence, or maybe a hidden agenda, or even this subconscious feeling that you don't really have a right to make your point. Maisel really stresses speaking directly. In short, clear sentences. When you're clear, there's just less room for misunderstanding.
So instead of beating around the bush and hoping they guess what you mean, you might actually say, you've been spending a lot more time at work lately. Does that mean we might have a problem?
Hmm.
Or, I want to stop working and start my own business from home. I know that has big implications, but I'd really like us to talk about it. Those are incredibly clear, direct, cuts right through any fuzziness.
Exactly. And this is really important. Being direct is not the same as being blunt or mean. Your tone of voice, your inflection, your body language, all of that can communicate kindness, even when you're tackling a difficult subject. You can say something important, something hard, without intending to hurt or insult the other person. That's a key distinction.
And it's definitely a two-way street, right? Families are notorious for sending mixed messages, like that example, I really want to have sex tonight, but I'm just not in the mood. Huh. So your job isn't just sending clear messages yourself, but also asking for clarification when you get unclear ones. But here's the tricky part. Doing it without attacking. That common, what did you mean by that, often sounds like an accusation. So how do you ask for clarity without making someone defensive?
It really comes down to curiosity, not confrontation. You could try saying something like, "Could you help me understand what you meant? I want to make sure I'm hearing you right." Maisel gives 6 tips for being clear about your needs, your wants, what you absolutely won't tolerate when a promise gets broken, who's supposed to do what, and crucially, what really matters to you. Telling the difference between small annoyances and your core values, that's vital for clarity.
Yeah. That difference between the small stuff and the big stuff could probably save a lot of pointless arguments. Okay, now let's talk courage. In families, fear isn't always this big, obvious monster. It can be subtle, even odd, as Maisel says. He talks about a client who was afraid to go home from work. Not physically afraid, but afraid because going home meant facing the truth about his marriage, that he didn't love his wife anymore, that they weren't really right for each other.
Exactly. And fears like that can show up in weird ways, right? Like workaholism or obsessive exercising or always needing to be out socializing, all ways to mask that underlying dread of confronting something difficult at home. This lawyer client, he first described his problems as just work-life balance stuff, but it quickly became clear that his deepest fear was actually facing his life at home.
And the path to bravery for him involved two specific things, didn't it? First, bravely going home at a reasonable time for his kids, and then bravely bringing up his unhappiness about the marriage with his wife, and maybe even just admitting it to himself first. It was a courageous move that led to counseling and eventually a renewed commitment, but it meant facing that subtle fear directly.
Right. And Maisel suggests this really powerful ceremony for building courage. He calls it crossing the deep divide. You get two small rugs, place them just a few inches apart on the floor, and you imagine this terrifying deep gorge between them. You let yourself feel that dizziness, that fear, but then you take a small step across one rug onto the other. It's a physical way of internalizing the truth that even really deep, old fears can be tackled with small, brave, consistent steps. It's like retraining your brain to see that the gap isn't as huge as it feels.
That is such a brilliant tactile way to deal with something as abstract as fear. Okay, last of the core skills we're deep diving on. Resilience. This isn't about just being stubborn, right, or obstinate. It's more about the willingness to shake off slights, insults, criticism, regrets, for the sake of moving forward. It's about adaptability.
Yeah, and the book gives a really stark example of stubbornness versus resilience. There was this writer client who refused point blank to make editorial changes to his book. Why? Because he really resented the editor's attitude, her high-handed delivery. Even though deep down he kind of felt the changes might actually make the book better, he prioritized his anger.
And what happened? He lost a big book advance, right? Costing himself and his family. He was digging in his heels, as they say. And it just tragically shows how being obstinate can hurt you, stop you from growing. Resilience, though, that's like getting back up off the ropes like a boxer. Still in the fight. Still able to chase your dreams even after you've taken a hit.
And resilience also means recognizing the emotional bruises you get from repeated hits in relationships. Things like negative self-talk, feeling hopeless, despairing. It's not just bouncing back blindly, it's consciously knowing what you're bouncing back from so you can actually heal those wounds.
And how does Maisel suggest we actively build resilience?
He suggests things like finding music that makes you feel victorious, making it your personal theme song, listening to it daily to soak in that feeling of triumph. He also encourages creating little personal ceremonies to deal with tangled feelings like hopelessness or anger or worry, helping you consciously get back in the fray, as he puts it, with renewed spirit ready to engage again. Now, it's really key to remember these 8 skills don't work in isolation. They all work together. What's really cool is seeing how these different abilities combine, kind of like ingredients in a recipe, to help you handle specific types of difficult family situations.
Okay, let's explore that. How does this whole toolkit apply to different family dynamics? Let's start with dealing with sadness and anxiety. How does Maisel suggest using these skills when those emotions feel almost contagious in a family?
Well, in an anxious family, for example, he might suggest practicing strength to kind of counteract their muffling effect on you, or cultivating calmness so you don't get sucked into their nervousness, their jitters. It's like building an inner firewall.
And there's a technique for fighting sadness and anxiety called the life purpose icon ceremony, right? You create a personal symbol, like a lighthouse maybe, or a smooth stone, something that represents your life purpose, your core intentions. And by carrying it or displaying it or even just visualizing it regularly, you keep reminding yourself what truly matters, which apparently really reduces distress by making your intentions more important than your temporary moods. It pulls you back to your anchor.
It really does. It reminds me of this client, Marianne. She started practicing these skills, initially hoping, she could change her family. But her husband complained about her new eating habits. Her son worried she'd spill secrets in her memoir. Her younger son kept having car accidents. It was like they were all reacting to her changes, pushing back. But despite their resistance, she stayed focused. She understood she couldn't control them. She focused on managing her own internal world, not theirs. And that's such a key insight.
That really is key. Okay, what about loveless and distant families, where there's just this lack of warmth, maybe disinterest, that can cause deep, lasting harm? Basil tells the story of Matthew, right? A client living with his pregnant wife and his parents' very emotionally dead house. And he finds a class on compassion training for new parents.
Yeah, he and his wife went, and it was incredibly moving for them. He said something like, Something in us thawed. They both cried. His wife had an even bigger reaction. But here's the kicker. It actually made living in his cold, distant family home feel worse, at least initially, because now they truly understood what love and connection felt like, and they saw so clearly how much it was missing in his upbringing.
Wow, that's a tough realization. So how does Maisel suggest dealing with those lingering memories, those feelings of being unloved that keep popping up?
He suggests something called the past whisperer ceremony. It could be as simple as sprinkling some water in a bowl or lighting a candle and just gently saying, "Be easy, past."
Hmm.
Or maybe looking at old childhood photos while repeating that phrase. It's a deliberate, almost meditative practice to gently calm the past that's still swirling inside you, to loosen its grip.
Okay, moving to warring and divided households. The fallout from constant family conflict, especially sibling rivalries, can last a lifetime. There's a client story about being constantly attacked by her ex-husband's father. He was threatening her with court actions. Sounds exhausting.
It was incredibly draining for her, but what she did was methodically use her toolkit. She used smarts to respond strategically. She practiced strength to speak up powerfully when she had to. She found ways to create calmness, like escaping to her garden sanctuary. And she used clarity, asking for direct clarification, which often made him back down. Look, she couldn't make the conflict disappear entirely, but she learned the skills to handle it as best she could, given it wasn't going away. It makes you think, what more can we really ask of ourselves than to equip ourselves to endure these things?
That's a powerful point. And isn't there a ceremony called finding the safety of the castle, where you visualize yourself safe inside strong castle walls, even while you're under attack? The idea is that this mental image lets you still live, breathe, maybe even find moments of peace right in the middle of external chaos, creating an internal safe space.
Exactly. Now, what about bullying and aggression? This can even include child-on-parent violence, which is tough to talk about. Maisel points out that cruelty can kind of spread within a family, become infectious. Joan's story is a really strong example here. Her teenage sons were constantly mocking her, wouldn't listen, often sided with their dad against her.
Right, and Joan decided to use her presence and clarity. Remember, she made this conscious choice. Next time they mocked her while she was making their sandwiches, she would just stop, stand there, stay put, stare them down, make her presence felt, undeniably. And then, slowly, powerfully, she'd say, "Never say that to me again."
Mm-hmm.
It took incredible strength and courage, she said. But something genuinely shifted. They got quieter, much less mean. That really shows the power of embodying these skills, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And to help someone take action against bullying, Maisel suggests the sooner rather than later ceremony. You name a challenge you need to tackle, like maybe finding an ally, someone to support you, and then you just repeat sooner rather than later as a kind of mantra to keep that intention right in front of your mind. It's meant to sort of nudge your brain into actively looking for solutions and chances to act.
Okay, then there are families with demanding, critical, and undermining behaviors. When you're under constant pressure to perform, Maisel says there can be this weird, magnetic pull toward failure, like the family almost wants you to stumble. There's Jackson, whose family constantly criticized him. His first coping method was just wearing headphones all the time.
Yeah, but his family, they were so determined to undermine him, they'd actually pull the headphones off. So his solution was pretty extreme, but it worked. He invited his brother, who was a Marine, to come live with him. He knew nobody would dare barge in on him then. It really highlights how desperately strength and clear boundaries are needed in those kinds of environments.
And when you're facing that undermining behavior, like the artist whose family keeps nagging about money, the key is direct but compassionate responses. For instance, to a parent who isn't actually affected by your choices, you might say something like, "My art is really important to me. It's meaningful work, and I'm making enough money from my other job to live okay. Can you try to accept my perspective on this?"
Right. Or maybe to a spouse who's the main breadwinner and is criticizing your non-financial contributions. You could say, look, I do want to contribute, and I know that's fair, but can I contribute in ways besides money? Can I contribute by being a good friend to you, by loving you, by being present, by handling things around the house? What stands out to you about those approaches?
They're assertive, definitely, but they're also kind. They state your truth while still trying to value the relationship. Yeah, assertive but kind. That's a fine line to walk. Okay, how about disorganized and chaotic environments? Maisel points out that growing up in chaos can weirdly lead to needing excessive control later, or even becoming really shut down emotionally. Laura's story, right?
Yeah.
Grew up in a huge, chaotic family, dramatic parents.
Yeah.
And she became this very prim woman, needing order constantly, feeling emotionally numb.
Yes. And for Laura, the crucial first step was clarity. She had to start saying clear things to herself about what her chaotic past was really like, and just as importantly, what she actually wanted for her future. This process of gaining clarity, it took several months, but it eventually led her to make a really hard decision to divorce from a relationship she actually adored in many ways, but which had been, as she put it, driving her up the wall for 17 years. It was a brave act of defining herself.
Wow. And to build calmness and openness in these chaotic situations, there's the tolerating a difficult thought ceremony,
Mhm.
where you deliberately think an exciting thought like, maybe I need a divorce, and just notice how your body and mind react.
Exactly. The idea is that just learning to tolerate those disturbing thoughts without immediately reacting or shutting down is a vital first step. It helps you gain some agency before you take action. Okay, lastly, let's touch on values clash. Specifically, when a family really prioritizes materialism, possessions, over maybe deeper meaning, Maisel talks about why, once your basic needs are met, just chasing more wealth doesn't really lead to happiness or better health. Research backs this up. Higher income makes surprisingly little difference to overall happiness beyond a certain point. Even very wealthy people can have higher rates of depression.
It really goes against the grain of what society often pushes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Jenny's example.
Hmm.
Her family was obsessed with material things, and it felt like low-grade torture to her. Her first reaction was almost to swing the other way, completely extreme asceticism, wanting a life with no things at all.
Right. But Maisel helped her see that things aren't the enemy in themselves. The key is whether they align with your deeper life purpose. If her purpose was to be a doctor, she wouldn't reject essential medical tools just because they were things. If you connect this to the bigger picture, it really makes you question how we define real well-being. Is it just about accumulating stuff? Or is it more about an internal sense of purpose, of living in line with your values?
That's such a critical distinction. Okay, so beyond these specific family types, Maisel offers some broader strategies for emotional health that kind of pull all these skills together. One really powerful idea is to invent yourself. It's this profound concept that you can actually consciously decide, who do I want to be? And then use your personality, the freedom you do have, to actively reduce your own distress. It's about taking charge of your identity, not just letting your family history define you.
Yeah, it's very empowering. Another crucial one is get a grip on your mind. Because let's face it, nothing causes more emotional upset than our own thoughts. Maisel teaches you how to spot those unhelpful, unserving thoughts and actively dispute them. Ask yourself, is this thought actually serving me? If its hidden goal is just to defeat you or mock you, you simply choose not to entertain it.
And then there's the need to heal the past. You have to acknowledge that past hurts leave scars, they linger. But you can choose how you relate to those memories now.
Yeah.
You can tap into your inner resources to move through the pain instead of being stuck in it forever. Healing isn't just a nice idea here. It's presented as an active job you need to do.
Definitely. And related to that, you can also learn to flip off the anxiety switch. This is a great visualization technique. You literally picture an inner switch that controls your anxiety, and you deliberately flip it to off. It's like making a conscious declaration. I refuse to live in this constant state of siege. I refuse to over-dramatize or catastrophize. I choose calm instead. It's about reclaiming that internal control.
And finally, maybe the biggest one, make meaning and focus on life purpose. Maisel makes such a strong case that meaning isn't something you just stumble upon. It's a psychological experience you create. You create it through daily meaning investments and looking for meaning opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And doing this dramatically reduces distress because you start prioritizing your intentions, your purpose, over whatever mood you happen to be in.
Exactly. So maybe you're feeling down. You say to yourself, okay, but I have my business to build, or I have my novel to finish, or I have work to do on becoming the person I want to be. You start each day by consciously deciding how you intend to make meaning. It becomes an active choice, not just a passive hope.
So there we have it. Maisel's core message seems really clear. Difficult families, they're a reality, often one we can't just walk away from. But these 8 essential skills, smarts, strength, calmness, clarity, awareness, courage, presence, and resilience, they offer a real, tangible, actionable path forward.
Yeah, this toolkit really is like a practical blueprint. It's for building greater personal power, finding ways to significantly reduce emotional distress, and living a life that feels more intentional, more yours. It really comes down to taking charge of your own journey, tending to your own internal landscape, no matter what chaos might be swirling around you.
Because while you might not be able to change your family members, you absolutely can change your relationship to the challenges they present. you can change how you show up. So, as you think about everything we've unpacked in this deep dive, here's a final thought to mull over. What's the one skill from Maisel's toolkit, just one that you could commit to practicing, maybe starting this week? How can that one skill begin to shift your own experience, either within your family or just in your life generally?